is something both peaceful and euphoric about being one with the natural world. But nature can also be profoundly terrifying. Today, we have 5 horrifying experiences. Now, without further hesitation, let's begin.
Number 1.
This week, me and my brother went up to Tennessee to visit my grandparents for 2 weeks. It has been 3 days so far, yesterday being the 3rd. I write this late at night with my iPad that is almost dead. I am currently in the Tri-City area. Me and my brother are staying in a small house next to the main house, a guest house you can call it. People usually rent out the house, but no one is staying in it at the moment, so we decided to stay there for the 2 weeks. It's about 40 feet away from the main house. Me and my brother decided to have a fire around 10 p.m. and have some s'mores, your standard typical campfire stuff. The fire started to die, and we needed to get new wood. There is woods approximately 80 feet from the small house, and my grandparents own a large forested hill. After that, there is private land and forest mostly full of deer trails. I, of course, had to go into the woods. I went in without a flashlight, as I've been in them thousands of times, and I know my way around them. I walk in about 12 feet, and I found a pile of dead branches laying next to a deer trail. It rained very recently, and the wood was wet. I had to go in deeper. I proceeded up the hill about 30 feet and found dry wood. I started collecting the wood, and 5 minutes in, I hear my name from my brother. "Hey, Kyle!" It was said in your standard outside voice, and it sounded to be coming from 20 feet away, and then I yelled back, "Yeah?" I got no answer, and then I did it again. "Yes?" And this time even louder. Still no answer. And then I yelled as loud as I could. After, I hear my brother finally respond. "Why are you yelling yeah? It's not like I called your name." At first, I thought he was just playing around to get me scared. I went back to the campfire. After about an hour, I had to collect even more wood. I then walked over to the previous location, and I brought a flashlight this time. I then again heard my name. However, this time it was my grandfather's voice. "Kyle!" It came from the top of the hill. I put my flashlight up to the hill and saw something move quickly in the tree line, like it was escaping my view. I was freaked out, but I believed it was a deer, as I saw one earlier. I walked back and said to my brother, "Hey, did Papa come out here and ask for my name?" My brother gave me a weird look. "No, he was out here earlier though to check on us." I told him that you went to get wood and you went back inside the house. I continued to think they were playing tricks on me. I tested them out, and within 30 minutes, I went into the woods to get more firewood. I waited for a good 5 minutes. Nothing called my name. I was about to head back, with wood in my hand, when I heard the crackling of branches behind me. I looked, and at the top of the hill, on the deer trail, I saw a figure holding a lantern. It was walking slowly, and its back foot was dragging. It stopped, and yet I could not see it. "Kyle, come here. I need your help," it said, but in my other grandfather's voice, who had been dead for 2 years. I dropped the wood and ran to the campfire. My brother then asked, "Why are you running?" I just stood there. "You must have saw a black bear, huh?" I just ignored him and sat down. I looked back into the woods, and at the tree line, the light of the lantern was flickering every 10 seconds, staying in the same spot. I told my brother to look out for it, but it stopped. No light at all. We waited for 30 seconds, then he decided to leave. I still looked, and as soon as he went into the house, the flickering started again, but faster. Each flicker of light had less time between each other. 10 seconds, 9 seconds, 8 seconds, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. It then stayed constant. The light started wobbling towards me. I quickly put out the fire and went inside the house and hid in my room. That's where I am now, typing this. Just a few minutes ago, I saw the light going around the small house, and later came close to my window. The doorknob wiggled a little, but it didn't fully open. I gotta get some rest. Good night. I'll update if anything happens.
Number 2.
This isn't one story, but rather a collection of stories my mom and her family members have told me over the years. A little background information. My mom grew up in a big family with 6 other siblings in a smallish town in southwest Louisiana, nearby Lake Charles, for anyone who knows that area. I'm not from there, but I can tell you based on a few visits that the area is deep south. Weird backcountry, middle of nowhere shit. It's kind of a creepy place, even if you don't believe in local lore. Not to mention, everyone in Louisiana is superstitious from what I can tell, so you hear lots of bizarre stories and should probably take them with a grain of salt. On the other hand, both my mother and grandmother are scientists, and many of their siblings are engineers. They are logical people who try to explain things rationally, despite their belief in the supernatural. But, at any rate, I'll try to briefly outline a few of the stories they told me about the woods nearby their house. These woods were off limits to them from the time they moved in, despite the fact that a path through the woods was a shortcut from their school to their neighborhood. They were explicitly told at a young age not to go out there. The reason my grandmother gave them these restrictions, in which she still insists on to this very day, was,
An old woman lives out in those. Don't go messing around in them.
my uncles have told me that whether or not there was an old woman out in those woods, adults didn't like their kids going out there. In part because teenagers were known to drink and mess around, which was very frowned upon in the small Catholic conservative town. The story about the old woman had been around for ages. All the kids knew about it and had nicknames for her like the Old Tree Lady, the Witch Lady, and Old Miss Scrooge, or something like that. Most kids talked about going in the woods or seeing the old lady, but very few actually had dared to set foot in them. The way my mom put it, you would see the path leading into the woods, go maybe about 20 steps in, and then feel the overwhelming urge not to go any deeper. And you wouldn't. For the longest time, my mom and her siblings obeyed the rule, though they were always curious about what lay inside. The only account I've heard of someone going into those woods as a child was told to me by my mom, who had heard the tale from a childhood friend of hers. He only told her this story when they had a chance encounter 20 years later in DC, and the woods happened to come up in conversation. She says she remembered bringing it up and kind of laughing about it because it all seemed so distant, and was, by that time, ancient history. But her friend got very somber and told her the following story in a deadly, serious, strained voice. As a kid, he was an only child, which was very rare in that area at the time. So, he was one of the few children in town who would spend a fair amount of time alone. When he was 10 or 11, he said he would sometimes get bored during the long summer days when no one was around to play, and used to go out wandering trying to find secret places and cool trees to climb, that sort of stuff. By that time, he'd long known about not going into the woods, but he eventually started exploring the outskirts and slowly going deeper in. After a while, he got used to going into the forest and enjoyed the fact that he was one of the few kids who had ever had the courage to explore them. On one particular summer day, left alone and bored to tears, he decided to plunge deeper than he'd ever had before. He did what had become his usual routine, slowly start down the path, creeping along so as not to alert anyone of his presence. Soon though, he got brazen and strolled down the path calmly, having grown used to the atmosphere of the wilderness. As he got deeper in, the path forked. One direction led towards town, going back out of the woods, and one path went deeper still. For the first time, he took the second path. As he went down the path, he noticed how completely darkened the forest became. He told my mom that the canopy became so thick that the sun would only shine in through a few patches. As he went deeper, it became narrow and overgrown, and eventually the dirt track just stopped, and you'd have to walk through ankle-deep mud. It was at this point he noticed the smell. It was at first a kind of swampy, rotten smell that is typical in those parts, but further in, it became overpowering and started to mingle with the sticky, sweet smell of decaying meat. This far in, the woods were completely hushed, even though it was the middle of the day. The cumulative effect was creepy, for sure, but not paranormal. It was just a deserted expanse of forest. No cool hiding spots, no exciting discoveries, no witches even, just a dense tangle of mud and roots and trees and vines. As he started to head back, feeling both a little unnerved and disappointed that there was nothing worth seeing there, he noticed a figure far off in the woods. It was far enough away that he could just make it out, but felt certain it had not yet seen him. He assumed it was an adult and figured that he was going to get in trouble for being out there, so he immediately did what he could to conceal himself. Being an outdoorsy kid and a skilled climber, he went right up to the nearest tall tree. As he got up to the top of the tree, he looked out for the person he'd seen, who was now just over 50 yards off, only to realize it was not a person. The way he described it to my mom was it had features that only a person could have: arms, legs, and it was standing upright. But there was something animalistic to the way it moved, and the way it looked around told him with complete certainty it was not human. From that distance, he made out that the creature looked a bit like a wrinkled woman, naked with long hair except for patches of dark tangled hair and fur sprouted all over its withered body. It was completely caked in mud, to the point where its bottom half and limbs were stained an earthy brown color. While from a great distance, it had looked about normal size. At this range, he could tell it was hunched and still stood over 6 feet tall, with long, spindly appendages. He couldn't see the face or eyes very well behind all the tangles of hair, but could make out that it was kind of scanning around and sniffing the air, and was methodically half walking, half crouching in its general direction. At this point, he said that he closed his eyes and held his breath for fear that he'd scream if he saw the thing up close, but he did hear it. He heard its wet panting breath and whines as it paced closer to his tree. My mom told me he described the thing as making a deep, throaty murmuring noise under its breath, mostly soft, but sometimes it would yell without warning, followed by high-pitched screams. It sounded like it was wheezing or laughing. It stalked around the area for an eternity, sometimes getting very close and then prowling off in another direction, only to circle back again. At one point, the creature seemed to go dead quiet, so much so that he thought it had left, only to hear an ear-piercing shriek and a flurry of movement from no more than 30-odd feet away. Throughout, he could hear it sniff the air and rustle and scratch at the brush, and he could discern when it was very close by the creaking of its joints and the slight rattle of bone knocking against bone. He had no idea exactly how long he was up there, but it was long enough for him to pee himself as he was bursting to go, but did not dare to move. Finally, he said that the creature crashed off into the woods and didn't return. Still, he stayed in that tree for so long that it got dark and he knew his parents would be looking for him. He claimed that it was only the thought of having to spend the night in the woods with that thing that made him get out of his tree and race out of the forest just as the stars came out. When he got home, his parents were furious with him, and he got heck for being out so late. He was just relieved to be out of those woods. When asked where he'd been, he told them that he was playing with friends and lost track of time. Apparently, it took him many years to tell what really happened to anyone, and only then to close friends who knew about the area and heard the stories. He never went back to those woods and stopped exploring on his own altogether.
Number 3.
My father was a lumberjack with his own company. He was a real entrepreneur in the industry, and most of the logs and whatnot that we imported to the main city were from his neck of the woods. I grew up in the forest, and we had quite a bit of money as we were growing up, and we lived in this beautiful, intricate mansion in the heart of the neighbouring forest. We were miles out from any bordering residences, and so I was quite introvert, and was one of those weird kids that develops a love for dancing in the rain and watching amphibious creatures do their thing for hours on end in the creek running directly through our backyard. Basically, what I'm saying is that I found myself alone much of the time. This isn't against my parents for letting me be this way. I just preferred my haven of space. So when I was about to start grade school, I knew our house was special. My mother even said so constantly. This house is a blessing. So I had a hero worshipping going thing on, and I never really wanted to leave. I never wanted to drive to the city to start kindergarten and socialise with kids who wouldn't comprehend my introspective reality. Mom told me I had to go, as I was assuming most people would understandably tell their kids. but I wasn't having any of it. And the night before I was supposed to start school, I decided to run away. I took the new backpack that my mum had gotten me and stuffed it full of clothes and fruit snacks. Our house was so unnecessarily large that you could stomp about on the base floor without anyone hearing you until they were about halfway down the first flight of stairs. I took advantage of that and grabbed all the sugary stuff that my mum wouldn't let me have more than once a day and let myself out the front door. I had made a choice to live with all the creatures that I watched on a daily basis, figuring they would be the only ones who would understand me. As I walked deeper and deeper into the forest, the trees seemed to grow and tower over me the further I went in, and what made it worse was that it seemed to have a noise cancellation effect. The hum of the woods and the slight sounds here and there of the animals seemed to completely die, as I was left with disturbing, soft quiet. Even at 5, I knew something was not right about this. I found a tree with a hive-like structure at its roots and nestled into it, laying my sole blanket over the top of myself whilst I tried to sleep. And in case you couldn't tell, that was not on the cards. After I'd been laying there for about 40 minutes, I started to relax and feel my eyes drooping. It had to be later than midnight at that point, but I can't say for certain. Anyhow, the noiseless environment actually began to comfort me to sleep, and it was just when the dream started to open in my head that I heard the first whisper. My eyes popped open and I held my breath, listening for it again. I was more surprised than anything else. Really. Especially because I had gone almost an hour in this wild silence. I didn't hear what it had said. I just knew that there had been this curiosity for me to sit up against the tree trunk to try and hear the voice. "Come here," it said. I turned and I realized it wasn't coming from the tree. I scanned upwards until I see the glimmering whiteness of an eyeball staring at me. An abnormally large squirrel, maybe the size of a house cat, hung by its tail over the branch, calmly smiling at me, with human white teeth and human eyes. It opened its mouth and barely spoke. "Come deeper, child." My breath hitched and I froze. The creature opened its paw and its long claws, that were about a foot long each, reached down and grabbed the tree. It started to crawl towards me, painfully slow, and its eyes got wider with each inch it took towards me. The calm it had before seemed to fade as an excitement was evoked with the increasing tempo of its eager pants. And that's where I found myself sprinting back home. I hadn't realised how far I'd gone into the woods until I was fighting for every breath I took and lunge in return. I could be manufacturing this, but I swear I heard deep clawing of the earth following me, with a speed that I can only imagine with those impossibly elongated talons. I burst through the threshold and the noise came about again. It was shocking. I almost faltered in my run to lounge in the comfort of it, but I could see my front door, and I wasn't staying there any longer. I skipped over the creek, where I took note of a strange collection of frogs sitting in a uniform line staring out of the woods, and I slammed the front door behind me. My parents still weren't up. I looked out the windows to see the frogs still in a line, and that figure in the distance, maybe where it had crossed that threshold, pacing like a wild, hungry predator. It was larger than a squirrel, at the very least, but I could still see from the bright white eyes, those human eyes, and I don't know why it felt this way. Maybe it was intuition, maybe it was something else, but some part of me knew that those eyes were stolen. I didn't go to sleep that night, and I made a promise to myself. I would never go back into the woods, never past the creek.
Number 4.
When I was in my teens, my friend Robert and I would often visit Glen National Park. It's a national forest preserve that's located just about 15 miles away from my hometown. It offers camping, fishing, and most importantly for our purposes back then, many winding trails to hike on. Robert and I didn't have a whole lot to do back in the day, so Forest Glen is where we would spend a lot of our free time. Both of us enjoyed the outdoors, and we would go hiking on one of the many trails nearly every day. Sometimes we'd do 2 or 3 depending on our mood. It wasn't long, of course, before we knew all of them by heart, and we both had our favorites, but that didn't matter though. We would still go on any of them on any given day. Eventually though, time went on and Robert and I grew up. Robert and I are still good friends, but we hadn't been to Forest Glen in a long time. It was recently that I had been reminiscing about those old trails though, and I decided that I wanted to go back out there and visit some of my favorite spots. So, 2 weeks ago I called Robert and asked if he wanted to go out there with me that weekend, and to my surprise, he was overjoyed at the proposal. He'd said that he'd been thinking about going out there himself, but just hadn't gotten around to it, so it was decided. On Saturday morning, we would head to Forest Glen and meet up at one of Robert's favorite trails. I made it out to the trail at Forest Glen about 10 after 6 in the morning. When I drove out to the reserve, I parked my car in the spot closest to the trail, but I didn't see Robert's car. There's more than one entrance into the park, so I thought that Robert hadn't arrived yet. Or he was parked at one of the spots that was near one of the other entrances. I thought I might call him, but when I looked at my phone, I saw that I only had one bar, and figured that it wouldn't go through. I should have known the reception would be bad out here. Stashing the phone in the glove box, I got out and made my way to the trail. I started to do some stretches in front of the trail entrance while I waited for Robert to arrive. After waiting for what felt like about 10 minutes, I began to wonder if Robert was going to show up late. When we made the plans to show up at the trail, we agreed on 6:30 a.m. I thought about jogging back to my car and grabbing my phone to call him, but I decided to instead venture into the trail a little ways and then return after a moment to see if he had shown up. I started my walk at a brisk pace into the opening of the trail. The clear path of the trail's entrance quickly gave way to a narrow, cleared path, surrounded on both sides by thick growth of brush and tall trees. The trail seemed a bit more overgrown than I remembered, but I suppose that was a good thing. It meant the preserve was thriving. I did notice, however, that it was rather quiet out there. That isn't to say there was no sound at all. I could hear the occasional caw of a bird and the rustling of leaves. But the sound seemed somehow muted. It was as if the entire woods had its volume button turned way down low. About 3 minutes into my stroll, I stopped just before a small stream that cut through the trail. I looked to the other side of the stream where the trail's path resumed. The path stretched out a few hundred feet beyond the stream and looked like it forked into 2 different directions as far as I could tell. This is when I decided to turn back and wait for Robert at the entrance. I never knew this trail like Robert used to, and for the life of me, I couldn't remember how far it went. Before I turned to leave, I knelt down to tie my sneaker. When I finished, I stood up and had to stifle a scream. Robert was standing right in front of me, grinning like an idiot, and when he saw the look on my face, he howled with laughter. My face went hot and I gritted my teeth. "What the hell, man?" I yelled. "You nearly gave me a fucking heart attack." Robert had to stifle his laughter to be able to reply. "Sorry, bud. I couldn't help myself. I was further up the trail when I decided to turn back and wait for you. And then I saw you kneeling here. I just couldn't resist." I couldn't help but to smile after that, and I could feel the red-hot feeling in my face start to drain away. "It's okay, but you did scare the living hell out of me. I didn't even hear you." Robert said nothing. He only smiled a wide, toothy grin. I gestured down toward the part of the trail Robert came from. "I was wondering if you'd gotten here yet. You can lead. I assume you know the way." Robert nodded in reply, then jerked his head back to where the fork in the trail was. Then he bounded over the stream that divided the trail. When his feet hit the other side of the small bank, he just kept running. "Hey, wait up!" I called after him. He acted as if he didn't hear me and carried on deeper into the woods. I really wasn't prepared to jog yet. I wanted to walk a little first and stretch out my legs. However, it seemed I didn't have a choice, and I bounded after Robert, hopping over the stream and pushing myself to catch up with him. Robert was jogging at an even pace, but not a quick one, and soon I was just behind him. "Can you wait just a second?" I asked. "Why? What are you afraid of?" he asked, turning to me with a wide-toothy grin that seemed to not have left his face. That question caught me off guard. What did he mean by that? "Nothing. I just need to stretch a little more before I pull something is all." Robert didn't stop or slow down. He just kept on smiling as he turned his head back around to face forward. "You'll be fine. There's a nice place to rest just after the fork in the trail." We kept jogging until we hit the fork, and I followed just behind Robert every step of the way as we veered off into the right path. Shortly after the fork, the trees in the forest grew denser and numerous, their leaves blotting out the light from the sky above. Even the path itself became more overgrown, as weeds and brush seemed to reach out towards the center of the path, attempting to catch what sunlight they could. Where before, it seemed that the sounds of the forest were on low volume, here they seemed to be on mute, as not even a buzzing of an insect could be heard. Though I could attribute the muted sounds of the forest to not being able to hear them over my heavy breathing and stomping of feet. The dense growth could not be ignored though. "Hey, this trail doesn't seem to be very well maintained. Are you sure you know where you're going?" I asked Robert, still keeping a close pace behind him, though my right leg was starting to burn. Robert didn't answer, but ignored me instead without slowing down. I stopped and knelt to rub my leg. I looked up to see Robert stop and turn around to walk back to where I was kneeling. "Sorry, man. I told you though, I needed to stretch more. I think I already hurt myself." Robert just smiled as he leaned on a tree next to me. "I'm sorry. I thought you'd be able to make it. We're not far from a really cool spot. I just got excited to be out here with you again." At Robert's words, I couldn't help but laugh and return a beaming grin. I had no idea he missed being out here so much. On top of that, it's been a couple weeks since we'd done anything together, so maybe Robert just missed hanging out. I couldn't blame him, so did I, but growing up gets in the way. "Don't sweat it, man," I said. "I really missed this too. What's the really cool spot you wanted to show me?" Robert's grin seemed to somehow get even bigger. "Okay, do you remember that wooden bridge we found one of the last times we were out here? It has that really deep stream running under it." The memory came back to me in a rush. It was vague, but I did remember finding a bridge the last time we came out here. I had completely forgotten which trail we found it on though. I remember the water under the bridge was so clear you could easily see the fish swimming about it. "It's on this path?" I asked excitedly. "It sure is, and I can't wait to take you there. I've been down there already. It's absolutely beautiful," Robert said. I stood up quickly and brushed some dirt off my knee. "Well, let's go," I exclaimed, walking forward on the trail. "Okay, but we can walk. I don't want you to hurt yourself," Robert said. I was going to tell him I would be fine if we jogged again, but I thought better of it. Though the excitement that came with the prospect of seeing that bridge again abated some of the pain in my sore leg, it was still there though. So, we walked on, talking about the memories of being out here on the trails as we walked side by side. Strangely, Robert was recounting things I hardly remembered. He said that he remembered a time when I scraped up my knees really bad after a nasty fall on one of the trails, but I didn't remember that. For the most part though, I could recall every single memory Robert had. And I realized how much time we really spent out there. We spent nearly all of our time out here as teenagers, staying in shape to try to impress the girls at school. We had been walking for about 5 minutes when Robert said, "Hey, do you remember that time when you fell down the slope and hit the bottom? I thought you died." Robert belted out a loud booming laugh. I stopped walking because something about what he said didn't make sense. I remembered falling down that slope like it was yesterday. It was terrifying. "Robert, you fell down that slope too, remember?" Robert, who hadn't stopped walking until then, froze just ahead of me. He turned slowly to me and slapped a hand to his forehead. "Oh duh, yeah? Well, I didn't fall as hard as you," Robert laughed, again dropping his head and gesturing back down the trail. "Come on, we're almost there." I began to breathe heavily, and I took a step back. Something was wrong. I didn't know what it was, but I had to get out of those woods and away from Robert. I had to get away, because a memory had finally resurfaced to the shore of my recollection. A memory of me falling and scraping my knees. Robert's grin for the first time since he snuck up on me faded from his face. "What's wrong, bud?" he asked, a little shaky. "I need to go back," I said, a little shaky myself. Robert took a step towards me, and a look of concern spread on his face. "Come on, man. We're so close. Why do you want to leave?" he pleaded. "Because you were homesick the day I scraped my knees." Robert's eyes widened in realization as I turned tail and began sprinting in the other direction as fast as my legs would carry me. Green leaves and brown bark flashed in my peripheral vision as a blur. The sound of wind swished around in my earlobes as I ran. I couldn't hear footsteps behind me, and I was thankful for that. My right leg throbbed and begged for me to stop, but I wouldn't. Fear is one hell of a motivator, and it pushed me past the fork in the path and over the small stream that divided the trail. I never looked back to see if Robert, or whatever wore Robert's skin, was following me. Not even once. I kept my eyes on the path in front of me and focused on not tripping over anything the whole way back out of the trail. I didn't stop running until I got into my car. Once inside, I grabbed the keys that I left sitting in the passenger seat and quickly turned on my engine. I paid no attention to the speed limit as I raced all the way home. Once at my house, I grabbed my phone out of the glove box and ran into the house, latching the deadbolt behind me. I turned my phone off when I stored it in my car at the preserve. So, once I got inside, I turned it on and sat on the couch while I waited for it to boot up. My plan was to call Robert immediately, but when the display on the screen flickered on, I saw that I had a text message from Robert. I opened it, but I was shaking so bad from the adrenaline, it was a little hard to read. "Hey man, so it looks like we can't go out to Forest Glen. I was talking to my neighbor this morning, and he said that they closed it down because at least 4 hikers were found dead by drowning out there. I hope this gets to you before you leave. Maybe we can just catch a movie or something." When I read the last word of the text message, there was a loud knock at the door. I jumped and stood from my spot on the couch. The knock came again, even louder. I crept over to the door as quietly as I could to look through the peephole. It was Robert. Robert stood on my front stoop with a wide-toothy grin. I saw him raise his hand up to knock once more, and as the sound thundered from the wood of the door, I backed away. On my phone, I searched my contacts for Robert's name and dialed. After 2 rings, Robert picked up. "Hey man, what's up?" Robert asked. "Robert, where are you right now?" I asked. "Well, I'm at the store right now. Do you want—" His voice cut out as I hung up and immediately began dialing the police. I explained to the dispatcher that there was an intruder trying to break into my house as I did not feel safe. The woman on the other end told me to remain calm, and she would be sending help to my address. When I hung up, I went to the door once again to look through the peephole. The Robert imposter was gone. When the police arrived, I just told them that someone tried to break into my house, and I came home to find them messing around with my door before they ran off. I didn't know what else to say. They said they would file a report and send a squad car by every couple of hours that day to make sure everything was fine. That was 2 weeks ago. Ever since that day, late at night, that thing comes back and knocks at my door. In a warped mockery of Robert's voice, it calls to me. "Let me in!" it wails. "Let me in! I am just so lonely. Come be with me." The first time, I obviously called the police, and the time after that. The third time, they stopped coming. The creature is always gone when they get here, but it always comes back. It's back tonight, and I can hear it as I sit on my couch with a bottle of brandy and a tight grip on a large butcher knife that I own. "Oh please, let me in," it pleads in a gargled wail that sounds nothing like Robert anymore. "I need more friends." I don't know what the hell is in Forest Glen National Park, but it followed me home.
Number 5.
So, my parents live in a pretty rural area, and I'm currently staying with them for the summer, sleeping in my old bedroom. The room is on the first floor near the backside of the house, which is pretty nice because it gives me a great view of the woods, something I don't have from the window of my college dorm. I like sleeping with the windows open because I get to listen to all the crickets and toads throughout the night. It's a soothing noise, and it really helps me lull to sleep. Of course, this being a heavily forested and largely uninhabited area, I hear other animals as well. Sometimes I can hear owls hooting, coyotes howling, even the occasional fisher screeching in the night. But the most unnerving animal noise to me, as a kid at least, are the deer. It's not because the deer are particularly vocal, but because they come closer to the house than any other animal, and often I'll hear their footsteps cracking dry twigs in the woods, less than 50 feet from my window. However, I grew accustomed, and as I got older, the deer footsteps became just as natural to me as crickets. That is, until the other night. I was up late on my laptop chatting with some friends of mine on Facebook, when I heard the familiar footfall of a deer outside my window, leaving crunching beneath its feet as it moved throughout the woods. I was in the middle of typing a joke about how my friends, city boys mostly, would be shitting their pants if they tried to sleep at night up here, when I heard something my ears weren't accustomed to, something that was distinctly different from the norm. I heard a sneeze. Now, if it were daytime, or even earlier evening, this wouldn't be too unusual because hikers stray from the trail and get lost on our property. But it was 3 in the morning, and no hiker in their right mind would be wandering in the woods alone. Suddenly feeling vulnerable, sitting next to the window with my desk lamp on, I hit the lights and closed my laptop, peering through my window and straining my eyes to adjust to the dark. I attempted to see who could be out there. The possibilities scrolled through my head. Could it be the neighbor's kid? Was he old enough for late night mischief? Could it be one of my brothers trying to smoke weed without my parents knowing? Maybe my mind was playing tricks on me when I heard the sneeze. Maybe it came from inside the house. Eventually, the footfalls began again, starting to the left of my window and moving across the woods to the right. Then, nothing. No sound. Based on what I could hear, they had stopped directly across from my window. Being slightly more sure that someone was out there at this point, I snuck through the house trying not to wake anyone, and dug through some cabinets until I found my dad's old handycam, which I used to play with as a kid. I carefully moved back into my room and aimed the camera out my window, being sure to cover the spot where the red dot would appear. Once the camera started up, I clicked on the night vision to see if I could get a better look at what was moving around out there. The night vision didn't have the range I wanted and only picked up a few details in the woods, some plants, a fallen tree, and 2 eyes shining from the darkness. I tried adjusting the zoom and focus on the camera to find out what the eyes belonged to, but nothing seemed to work. The night vision just wasn't strong enough, I guess. I wish those eyes were all I had seen. I wish I could have just called it a night and chalked it up to my imagination. But right as I was getting ready to put the camera away, the night vision picked up on something else. The upturned crescent of teeth widening into a smile right beneath the eyes. As I sat in silent panic, the eyes and teeth receded into the darkness, and the sounds of footfalls slowly faded into the distance. The next morning, I checked the spot where the sounds had come from, as well as where I had seen the eyes, but I found nothing aside from some broken twigs here and there, where whoever had been out there had walked. I tried to follow some sort of trail, but the undergrowth became too thick and I lost any sense of where the footsteps might have gone. I was ready to chalk it up to some pranksters trying to scare me, until this morning, when I walked down the driveway to pick up the mail. Sitting on top of the mailbox in a plain, unmarked envelope was a picture, printed on paper of me sitting at my computer, followed by another picture of my front door, another of the inside of my house, and finally one of me asleep in my bed. I don't know what to do. I don't know how this person is getting into my house, and I don't know who to tell about this. One thing's for certain, this isn't a prank, because beneath the final picture, written in sloppy chicken scratch, was a single sentence. You shouldn't have looked. From now on, I will wonder if the noises I hear in nature belong to something unexplainably sinister. Also, I have a quick personal update for everyone. I'm currently in the process of moving, so life will be pretty busy for the next couple of weeks, but I plan on uploading at least once a week. After the moving process is finished, I will be uploading at least twice a week, if not more, and of course, in the meantime, I will be replying to your comments and reading your stories. Also, please check out my good friend's channel, Mortis Media. He has plenty of great stories. And if you enjoyed these stories, you can like, comment, and feel free to subscribe. The next time you're in nature, and you think you are alone, you might not be. So, you guys stay safe out there. Until next time.